Who's that? Oh, that's right. Yeah, you go. Yeah. Are you alright? Otherwise, no. I'll be alright. What's that? I'm tired. Oh, I need to do something. Wow, there's babies.
Where is everybody?
I'm here.
So scary.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Welcome. So we're just waiting for a few minutes just to get a few more people in the room, and then we are going to start tonight's session.
Cool.
Got my headphones. I don't have my headphones.
Then why did you do that? Hello.
Okay, and as you Okay, just checking. Can everybody hear me? Thumbs up. Thumbs up. Great. Okay, so we're going to get started with this evening's discussion. So welcome to our first panel discussion. For those who have joined us previously, you would have been part of our open discussions where we had everybody joining in and being able to be part of the conversation. So I'm Chantal Carty, your host for this evening, for those who don't know me, and I'm also joined by my co-founder, Miss Derenique Chambers. Derenique, are you there?
I'm here. Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, can we move with the presentation, please? Thank you. Okay, so for those who don't know about Montserrat Voices, we are a community action group where we kind of have conversations, and our aim is to be able to take actions going forward that will benefit the community. So this evening, we will be talking and looking at the following in terms of exploring Montserrat's culture. So these are some of the things that have come out of previous conversations where people are saying, you know, especially the younger generation are saying, you know, what constitutes Montserrat's culture? So we've got some great people on the panel today who will be able to have that conversation with us. And also we'll be looking at, sorry, if you can go back one, Derenique, please. Yeah, and we'll also be looking at the issues affecting Montserrat identity and the perceptions of the Montserrat community. So there's a range of conversations that we're going to have for this evening. Okay, so as you may have noticed, we've asked you to mute on your way in. So tonight's session is slightly different. You will be muted throughout the whole session. And the idea is that you would be able to utilize the chat to ask the panelists any questions that you may have, and then we will communicate that on your behalf, okay? In terms of your video, it's up to you if you want to be on video or not be on video. The choice is absolutely yours. We will be recording, and it's for posterity, really, you know, for the generations to come who may need to hear and understand some of these things that we're covering and talking about today. So I am going to introduce the panel, and we have 6 panelists today. The first panelist is Edwin Martin, and Edwin is a journalist, and he's been a journalist for several years, over about 33 years, and he's been working for the Miami Herald in several capacities. So as writer, reporter, senior copy editor, online producer. He's also the founder of Montserrat Spotlight. So for those of you who are on Facebook, this is something that you may want to follow. It's also, he also has a website where you can also follow, and it focuses on Montserrat history and culture and things like that. Edwin is also a writer, author, and his publications include The Stranded Batsman, Jim Allen's Story, also Montserrat Festival, This Is Us. So there's quite a few books he's published in relation to Montserrat. So, and Edwin is also a calypsonian. So for those who have been back home at Christmas time, you know, we're in December, the season of celebration and festivities. You may have seen him as Red Ride. So for those who know, that's Edwin Martin, okay? Our next panelist is Shane Hogan. So Shane is a student at the University of Warwick, and he's interested in community development and politics. And Shane has done a research project that has looked at the Montserrat identity. So his project is titled Reimagining Identity, the Montserrat Diaspora. And that looks at the fluidity of identity and belonging. So that's something as well that we're going to be covering off today in this conversation. So that's Shane Hogan. Our next panelist is Mel Roach, who is familiar to quite a lot of people. So Mel is a poet and author and a lot of other things as well. Her publications include Tamarind Seeds, and she's also got a series called that's linked to her Tamarind Seeds book called Tamarind Seeds Series. I can't remember, I might have missed a little bit there. So where she sells items in relation to the things that she talks about in her book. And you can find out more of that on Facebook if you are a follower of Mel. She's also an active board member of East Midlands Caribbean Carnival Arts Network, and she's been heavily involved in the Nottingham Carnival. So bringing that back to life and being heavily involved in that here in the UK. She's also a past member of the Montserrat Festival Committee. So she has some experience there in terms of that culture piece and carnival and so on. Heavily involved in community activities, planning, promoting, and so on, enhancing Montserrat and its culture. And her passion is for heritage and culture. So that's Merle, everybody. So thanks for having her here. Our next is James White Jr. So James White Jr. is lay preacher at Faith Tabernacle Pentecostal Church, where he focuses on youth development and evangelism. He's also a community development advocate, and he is the executive producer at Radio Montserrat, where he's responsible for news, current affairs, and programming. So James White Jr. is here representing those on Ireland. So thank you, James. And our next panelist is Miss Coretta Farrell. So Coretta is an experienced mentor, speaker, and facilitator. She's an award-winning innovation and change management professional, and she's the co-lead for equality, diversity, and inclusion at Birmingham City Council. And she holds a double master's degrees in international development from University of Warwick and international service from American University. So you can see that we have a wealth of experience here with us this evening. And last but certainly not least, we have Charmaine Grinaway. I've known Charmaine from I was really young. I've known Charmaine as a nurse, working alongside my mom. Charmaine is a specialist nurse with expertise in neurology and continuing health care. She's a woman of many talents, and those also include writing. She's an author, editor, publisher, and some of her publications include The Traveler's Guide to Montserrat's English and Dialect, something that we really want to touch on this evening, Montserrat Cooking, Modern and Traditional, and I think one of her latest projects is Hope for Montserrat 25 years after volcanic eruption, where she's collaborated with, I think, several authors to do an anthology looking at Montserrat and its history and its culture. She's also a certified public speaker and presenter, okay? And she has a passion for writing, inspiring, and motivating others through the written and spoken word. So that is our panelist for this evening. And as I say, you can see that there is a wealth of experience and knowledge and passion as well in terms of Montserrat, its culture, identity, and community. So now we're going to go into the conversation. So we're going to let the discussion begin. And I'm going to start off with my first question to the panel. And that question is, in terms of Montserrat culture, this is one of the things that came up in our last session with the young people, the next generation session, where someone said, you know, what constitutes Montserrat's culture? These are terms that we use and we say, but do we really know what Montserrat culture is? And for a lot of the older generation, we'll be able to say this, that, and the other. But when we think of the younger generation who are born abroad, in the UK, in America, and other places, who may not have been immersed in Montserrat culture in the same way some of us have been, you know, that's the question that I would like to pose to the panel. So I'm going to throw that question firstly to Charmaine, to ask her to give her thoughts on what Montserrat culture is, or the main aspects of Montserrat culture. So over to you, Charmaine.
Well, hello, everyone. It's nice to be here. Thank you for asking me, Shani. It's indeed an honor. In terms of Montserrat culture, I mean, that's a big question because I've heard it asked many times, and a number of people, many Montserratians, in fact, find it difficult to identify with the culture of Montserrat. Now, the first thing I would like to touch on is actually our unique dialect. There is no other nation that speaks a dialect like we do. There are similarities, but our dialect, the words we use, the phrases are totally unique to us. The way we use them, our pronunciation, the tone with which we use those, and where we put our emphasis on a particular word to give it a particular meaning is only unique to the Montserrat people. We look at things like the St. Patrick's Day celebration that we have, and what constitutes the St. Patrick's Day celebration. It's a national holiday, and we celebrate this day in a unique way in that we have direct displays of culture, food, the wearing of the madras, the masquerade dances, socializing with the Irish. I mean, all of those, although some of them might strike you at first glance as being part of our very heritage and culture, because it comes from way back. And there's a history to all this. Our festival celebrations, again, we know that during our festival celebrations, there's set things that we would setting the jumbie table. Cultural. I have not heard of any other island or country who does who sets the jumbie table, and on that jumbie table, you will have specific cultural foods which can be identified as only Montserratian in origin. The way the table is set out and the purpose of the table is all unique to Montserrat. And I'm going to this because there's a lot of it. And when you talk about the traditional music of Montserrat as well, even though Calypso, for example, the other islands would also have Calypso as part of their culture, our Calypso, the way they sing the Calypso, the social commentary, that sort of thing is totally different to how the other islands would do it, you know. And soca, again, soca is, you know, a Montserrat thing. And although you have people in Trinidad singing soca and other people, the way the soca is brought forth by Montserrat is totally different, and it's all part of our culture and our heritage. Now, when it comes to music, we're talking about the drumming that came from, you know, way back in Africa, and the playing of the five. I was told that my dad, for example, who was quite old, that he played the five, you know, in a band, Molke band, and all that, part of our culture. And there are people who are still, you know, drumming still goes on, the playing of the five still goes on, all culture. When we talk about our traditional dishes that came from, we think, for example, the goat water, that's Irish true derivative. We know it came from way back during the plantation days, slavery days. And so there's so much so much of our culture that we have that it's unstoppable. I can talk forever on our culture, the use of the tea bush and using it as a resource in contemporary alternate medicine, for example. That's a big one. Because when you talk about your cough bush, you talk about cough mixture. When you talk about your soursop bush, this is a sedative. Okay, you talk about your body kettle bush, that's to dress your sore foot. Your fever grass, it's gonna cool you down, you see? Your pump coolie is gonna clean you out. Here you go, contemporary medicine. And this is Montserratian, this is all part of the Montserrat culture. And it is not to say that other cultures are not, they do not have similarities, as I said, but the way we use our resources culturally would be totally different, and there would be also similarities. Now, the way we discipline our children and our very socialization, the way we greet each other politely, you know, support the way we support our families and the extended families, these unique to Montserrat. Montserrat has its own way of doing things, and it's all part of the culture which has been handed down. And then we have our folk ways. So you might do, I might wash, let's take, for example, the way a Montserratian would wash their chicken. I'm taking simple things, you know. They wash the chicken until the water run clean. Not everybody would do that. That's the Montserrat way. And if you see a person doing it, you might be tempted to ask, are you from Montserrat? You know? And the expressions you use, look at the expression. You want to school your child, you know, discipline culturally is unique to us. So you do it in a particular way. The look you give that child, if he annoys you, you just, you know, shrivel up and get scared because they know this is meaningful. They know you're saying to them, look, you have to change what you're doing. You got to stop what you're doing or else. And then the last thing I want to touch on right now is our surnames. I know a number of the islands where the Irish where they colonized, they too have similar surnames. However, that we have to agree is part of our culture.
Thank you very much, Charmaine, quite comprehensive. So I'm going to throw the same question to Edwin now. Edwin, in terms of culture, you know, in your opinion, what are some of the main things or anything you want to share in terms of the main aspects of Montserrat's culture?
That's a tough act to follow. I think Charmaine covered it all. You know, in general, culture is sort of like what we call the identity of a people. It's those qualities that make a group of people or a place unique. And she went over many of those things, from the way we eat, from the way we dress, from the music we listen to, our expressions, our language, and everything. One point I wanted to make, I had a conversation recently with somebody most of us know is in Montserrat, Anne-Marie Dua. She's an educator, she's a Creole poet. And she and I had a conversation about our language in Montserrat, and she wanted to reiterate to me that it should not be considered dialect. It should be considered Creole because it's an amalgamation of different languages, just like English is. English borrows from all kinds of different languages. And I could remember going to primary school in Montserrat where we were sort of forbidden sometimes from speaking what we call bad language, which was the native tongue, which was called Irish brogue. And so what I think Ms. Dua wanted to sort of drive home is that that language that we speak in Montserrat should not be considered bad language or a secondary language or an offshoot of English. It's its own particular unique language, you know? And so those are the things that make our culture unique. Especially language is really, really an important part of that. And I think it's amazing when you look at the Caribbean and you see that all those islands are so close together and each one has a unique language, a unique, you know, even we're 27 miles away from Antigua and we speak completely different as far as our language. So language is an important part of culture. And like she said, you know, the goat water, you know, the masquerades, the way we do it, different things like that. Those are the things that make culture unique. And yeah, I think she covered most of that. But I just wanted to to sort of just address the language issue and to give some more specificity to that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And that's the point that I really want to pick up on next in terms of the language, you know, and the fact that it's so different to Antigua, so different to St. Kitts, yet as you rightly say, we're in close proximity. Some people might say that we sound, you know, especially for those who have come to England or different places, a lot of the time you get comments saying, oh, you know, are you from Jamaica? You sound Jamaican and so on. And in my opinion, the two accents are quite distinct, you know, clear distinction in my mind. So I want to bring the whole language conversation or language as being an important part of culture, because for a lot of people, their language will straight away let you know this is who they are or this is where they're from and so on. So in terms of language as being an important part of culture, I want to kind of bring Merle in here. So Merle, is there anything you would want to add in terms of almost like the importance of holding and maintaining our Montserrat Creole? I should be saying dialect, Edwin. I'm supposed to be saying Creole. Montserrat Creole. So anything you want to add in relation to that?
Certainly. Thanks for having me, first of all. Now, I'm so glad that Edwin brought up that point that Anne-Marie made about the difference of calling it Creole, because I really agree with that. There's this thing about patois that all of a sudden has become very popular as a way of describing the Caribbean islands and the way we speak in our native tongue. And I've always stood away from that, because for me, growing up, patois was a French thing and it had to do with the French islands. So I love this Creole and I think I'm going to adapt it too. Now, language and accents, you have to bring the two together, because the accent is what even makes the distinction more specific between the islands. The accents are different. So when you marry the Montserrat accent with the Montserrat language, you make that a unique identity that is Montserrat culture. And it's very important because it helps us to tell our stories, which is part of our culture. There are stories that are specific to Montserrat only. There's no other place in the Caribbean or in the world you're gonna have a mermaid in Chance's Peak. Only in Montserrat. Our stories are our part of our culture. The things that, even the Jumbie stories that people used to be told back in the day, you know, and you need our language to tell that story the right way for it to be identified as Montserrat. Now, I'm going to ask a question. I know I'm here to talk, but I'm just going to ask a question. Can anybody in the panel give me a saying that you think is unique to Montserrat, just off the bat?
Oh, God.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Ayo.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm glad you said that. Charmaine, do you have any to add?
Me no bang no water come here.
Okay. You see, and those are things that when people say, you're in a crowd in Australia and you hear somebody say, ayo, right away you spin around.
Yes.
Because that tells you that person is from Montserrat. So wherever you go in the world, there's certain things, and because it's part of you, you don't even realize that you're saying it. I'm just going to share a little thing with people, because none of you all said something that I was told, and I didn't think it was unique to Montserrat until it was told to me. I lived in Antigua for how many years? And at one time I used to take the bus to Pigots, and I was sitting at East Bus Station in the bus waiting for it to fill up as usual. And I saw a Montserratian pass, and I called out to the person, and they came back and we chatted for a while, because I was sitting in the front seat with the driver on his side. And when the person left, the driver turned to me and said, I never knew you were from Montserrat. So I said, and how did you realize that just now? He said, I know you're not an Antiguan, but I was never sure exactly which island until you said something just now. And I thought back, what did I say? What did I say? And I didn't remember saying IO because I know that is one thing that Antiguans love to hear Montserratians say. And you know what he said to me? Me no. I said, are you joking? He said, no. He said, I am even older than you, and I have been traveling up and down the Caribbean islands. And the only island people I hear say, me no, is Montserrat. And as soon as you said it just now, I went, oh, she's from Montserrat. Identity,
Yeah.
language, it's ours. There's certain things, it's ours.
Right. Thank you so much. And yes, I 100% agree. Here's a question that I have. So, and I'm using my own personal experience. So in the house, like, well, most of you know, if you're joining from elsewhere, I live here in UK. And in the house, we speak, my husband and myself, we just speak Montserratian all the time. We don't try to talk British or anything. We just speak Montserratian all the time. And I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and she mentioned that she didn't speak, when her children were younger, she didn't really speak our Montserrat Creole. She just always spoke proper all the time. Do you think it's important for us to speak our dialect in the house, our Creole in the house, especially when we have young children? That's my question to the panel, and any of you can come in on this one.
Yes, this is Charmin. So yes, it is very important to talk that dialect, that's whatever you want to call it. If you want to call it Creole, fine. But in order to pass on part of our history and culture, it is done orally through storytelling as well. And one thing about storytelling, if you tell it in English, some stories, if you tell them in English, it's not the same. You tell them with this posh English accent, it's not the same. But when you tell it in the Montserrat Creole dialect, it lends authenticity to it. And also, language is a social function that actually fosters feelings of group identity. So when you hear people talking the Montserrat dialect, immediately you can identify. You know, and I want to just highlight something here. We need to bring the Montserrat Creole to our schools, and within the current environment of subcultures, because we are filled with subcultures right now. If we don't bring the Creole to our schools,
Charmaine, you've gone frozen there.
oh, okay.
Okay, yeah. Can you say that point again, please, about bringing the Creole to school?
Yes, I was saying that our language should not be downplayed. We need to raise it up. Our Creole, we need to write it and bring it to the schools, because in our current environment of many subcultures in Montserrat, we need to, if we do not reinforce it, we will lose it, or we will have a watered down effect. And there you go. There we go, losing our culture, and we can't afford to do that. It is too important.
100% agree. It's too important to lose our culture. And I jokingly said to my friend, like, if when the children go home, they don't get lost. You know, when people are talking and just talking raw, they 100% understand everything. So they don't go home and feel odd or feel out of place, because they can pick up the dialect quite easily and yes, fluently. And I guess it's the same as what, for example, the Asians do, that their children are quite fluent. Not that Montserrat's a foreign language, but they're quite fluent in Urdu or whatever, as well as in English. And I also think that our children should be able to understand the terms and the sayings and the way in which we say certain things, from a very young age. 100% agree there. So we mentioned about identity. So that's the other thing that we wanted to kind of cover off or discuss here this evening, is to do with identity. And again, in previous conversations, the question was, well, when we use the term Montserratian, who exactly are we talking about? Or how broad is our vision as to who Montserratians are. So I would like to pitch that question to Kireta in terms of Montserratian and using that term, you know, who are Montserratians to you in your mind?
Thank you, Chantal, and thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. Yeah, as you said, it's a sticky question. It's a question that's filled with loads of tensions. I think to some, I'm Montserratian because I was born in Montserrat, although I left when I was 2 years old. And then also to some, with my younger sister who was born in the UK, she's not classed as Montserratian, but to others, because she has 2 Montserratian parents, she's classed as Montserratian. I think for me, in order to kind of be called Montserratian, I probably subscribe to a broader definition. I'm a kind of, if you were born in Montserrat, if you're descended from Montserratians, if you've lived on an island for an extended period of time, I think I'm less concerned with the technicalities of Montserratianness. For me, what's important is the sustainability and the future of the culture. And I think if we continue to define it very narrowly, I think it kind of puts the future of our culture kind of into flux a bit. So, and then I guess I think about the future and how many children moving forward are being born on islands, how many children moving forward have 2 Montserratian parents. Even in my generation, like I have a lot of cousins who maybe have 1 Montserratian parent and a Dominican parent, or 1 Montserratian parent and a Jamaican parent. So I think I would definitely subscribe to a more broader definition of the culture and of the identity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your point there, Kireta. James, you're on mute at the moment, so we need you to come off mute, and let's try that again. Okay, so, oh, there you are, there you go. Oh, you've gone back on mute. You came off and you've just gone back on. Let's try that again. Okay, yes, here you are.
Okay,
There
I'm there now.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'm there now. Just like Kireta said a while ago, for those of us in Montserrat, you know, identity is very important. Now, I'm going to use a word here which actually denotes who we are. There is a certain Montserratianness that is associated with people who were and are being born here. However, for me, Montserratians are those persons who were born here, those who are naturalized, or by descent, meaning that those persons born to Montserratian parents. So, Kireta, you're on the right track. According to the Montserrat Constitution, that's the Constitution Order of 2010, citizenship may be acquired through the status of a British Overseas Territory citizen, that's BOTC, by registration, adoption, by descent, birth, and we could throw in someone who was born aboard a ship or an aircraft, of course, within the Montserrat space. Now, I think that education about Montserrat's history, the younger generation should be left to really choose who they want to be. One thing that cannot be hid is that they are children of Montserratian parentage, whether in the UK, the US, or in the Caribbean, wherever they might be. And in fact, one thing that I think should be instilled in them, in their history, wherever they are, and you know, as they grow, they can choose that identity, but you can never, ever take that Montserratian out of them, because they will always be reflecting on who they are, who their parents are, where they were born, and such things like that. So I just wanted to add that little dimension.
Thank you so much, James. And I'm going to come to Shane, and he probably knew I was coming his way now, in terms of that identity conversation as well. And James pointed on something there where he said, you know, some of these young people, they have a choice, you know, especially if they're born outside of Montserrat to Montserratian parents, or even it might be that it's their Montserratian grandparents or something, you know. what would you like to add in terms of this identity conversation, and based on the work or on the project that you had?
Thank you for inviting me to this platform, Chantal. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys tonight. I agree with much of what has been said already. Specifically on language, I'd like to quickly add that I think language really represents, or it reflects how culture functions more broadly, in that Montserratian dialect or Montserratian Creole, it's I think amalgamation of different, so Edwin said it, an amalgamation of different elements and different aspects of other cultures, so our African heritage as well as our Irish inheritance. And we took that, and the people of Montserrat reinvented themselves as Montserratian, and today that's what we know as being Montserratian. And that really tells us how culture is constantly undergoing this process of like reinvention or recreation. And because of that, it's difficult to enforce one idea of what it means to be Montserratian. Or although James referred to it, even he struggled to actually define exactly what Montserratianness is. And I would say, for the younger generation, people who are growing up in Britain and the US, they're going through that later stage of reinvention or development. So it's acceptable for my generation, people growing up outside the island of Montserrat, to identify as Montserratian. But it's really important that we recognize that what they deem to be Montserratian today won't be the same as people previously considered to be Montserratian, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do understand what you're saying. And that's a valid point, because my children, as they're growing up, and I have to use my children, so I do apologize. But my children, for example, the way how they're going to express their Montserrat identity and culture is going to be different, because it's now fused with British culture. So that's where that fluidity in identity actually comes in, because we're now in a different place, a different space. So that is going to have an impact on how they evolve in terms of, you know, their Montserrat identity. But some really good points made there. But I think on a whole, what Kireta was saying about we have to understand Montserratians as a broad term, not just who's born there or who's born in the waters or who's naturalized and so on. I would like to think, and you guys might laugh, but it's just me, I would like to think that my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren, whether they are mixed race, whatever race, however they come out, might not be here to see it, but I would like to think that they will take pride in saying, yo, my great-great-grandmother Chantal
yes,
was from Montserrat. And therefore, they want to hold on to some aspects of that. And that, for me, is such a big, big thing, that if we limit Montserrat, you know, who's Montserratian to that narrow definition, then my children, you know, my grandchildren and my great-grand, even my children might even start to question, are they Montserratian? And right now they do say that, and I jokingly say, you never born there. But, you know, it's an inside joke. It's an inside joke. They know I'm only playing, you know, they know I'm only playing. But I hope that everybody on this panel understands the importance of, you know, us holding, and as Kireta said, I had to write it down. It's about that sustainability and the future of our culture. Because if they can't identify, then they're not going to hold the traditions. They're not going to hold on to anything if they can't identify, you know. And Mel, over to you.
Yes.
I was just going to say one thing. The whole thing about identity and Montserratian. Look at what's happening in the world today with people going and using ancestry to trace, you know, way back what tribe they came from in Africa and all of this. And so we have something as simple right now as our parents and grandparents who are still alive and that kind of thing, we can identify with, or young people can identify with, even though they're not born in Montserrat. So we have to just embrace the whole thing. When Montserrat is in your DNA and it can be traced in any way, you should have the choice to label yourself a Montserratian.
Thank you, Mel. Shane, you were going to come back in with a point.
Just quickly, I'd like to say that both you and Miro refer to these means that we could, these means for us to sustain Montserratian culture, and I think they're good ideas, and they're things that we should consider and we should pursue. But also, I'd say that this maintenance, it happens naturally as well. So even if we were to drop the ball here, I don't think it's the end of Montserratianness per se, because in a similar way, hundreds of years ago, hundreds of slaves, thousands maybe, arrived in Montserrat from Africa, and hundreds of years later, when you go to Montserrat, when you look with your naked eye, you can't see it. You won't be able to identify that Africanness. When you look under the surface of different things, and from someone made these Jumbi stories, and you could trace those Jumbi stories back to the continent of Africa, and even down to some hairstyles, like braids, etc. That's our African inheritance, and also the way we speak. Our Creole is informed by our ancestry as well. So even if we don't do the work, or we don't undertake this artificial work, which is very important, I believe, I still think Montserratianness will reappear in different areas of our descendants' lives. So my great-grandchildren, there might be something in their principles maybe, or a dish they like to make, or a saying that they have, that they got from me or my parents or my family. And that's where you'll see like their Montserratianness coming out here and there, if that makes sense.
Yep. Totally get what you're saying. So it's going to be ingrained in them, and sometimes in their subconscious as well. So it will come out and manifest in different ways.
That's it.
Yeah. So thank you for that point. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay. So the next bit we want to look at is in relation to that community piece. And one of the things, again, we had a focus group conversation a month ago. And one of the things, and this has come out in previous discussions that we've had as well, in relation to us as a community potentially being a bit fragmented, almost like a disconnect between those on island and those here. When I say here, let me say abroad. So sometimes there's this disconnect where we might not necessarily be working together as much as we can be working together, or involving and including those abroad in terms of what's happening on island and things like that. So that's the next bit I wanted to get us to address, and then we'll have a look at some of the comments and questions that are coming at the panel. But that's the other question I would want to come to. So I will take this question to Edwin. And it basically is just because this thing is about perception as well. Some people will say, well, there's no disconnect, you know, and some people will say, well, actually there is, because of X, Y, and Z. So this is very much about perceptions. It's not that anybody's right or wrong, but it's just about how you're seeing things from your side of your eyes. So in terms of that disconnect, what are your thoughts on this? And do you think, if you feel that there is a disconnect with those on island and those abroad, have you ever thought about how we could potentially address that? So that is my question. I'm going to bring that one to Edwin first.
I do think there's a disconnect, unfortunately, and I really believe that it was exacerbated by the volcano. I think it's sort of a very, very complex issue, and I can give you some personal sort of stories about it. Speaking personally, I left Montserrat when I was 10 years old, way before the volcano. And but I've always maintained a connection with Montserrat. I go back often, and I've always maintained, you know, a connection with my culture. Being in America, being educated and learning different things, especially in the field of journalism, I feel I can make a contribution to Montserrat in that area, as far as being, you know, sort of a historian, storyteller, writer, and everything. And to be honest, I've met some resistance because I think some people in Montserrat feel, okay, you ran away from here. Who are you to come back now and tell us how to do things? Unfortunately. And I think there is a bit of a resentment that exists. It might not be always overt, but I think there's a sort of a silent resistance there that exists because I think some people in Montserrat feel that a lot of us ran away, especially they feel some people ran away during the volcanic crisis. And it's like, okay, you're coming back now and trying to tell us how to run our country. And I think there's a pushback there, unfortunately. A lot of us who migrated, we have evolved, in many ways. We've learned different things. We've learned different ways of life. There are things maybe we did when we lived in Montserrat that we have sort of altered and changed. I think you can do both. I think you can maintain your culture and still evolve in other ways. And I do think that there is, like I said, that sort of unstated resentment where we're away from Montserrat, and maybe sometimes we go back and we feel there are different ways that the country can improve. But I think that some people in Montserrat feel that we should not, maybe we haven't earned the right to have a say about how Montserrat can improve because we left. And so unfortunately, I think there is that disconnect. I'm not going to say that it's a universal sort of sentiment, but I think that it exists. And unfortunately, it has sort of been detrimental in our progress in many ways. So how do we solve it? We solve it by doing things like what we're doing now, communicating. We solve it by speaking to each other and hearing each other. And, I always say that one of the reasons that we have conflict is because we cannot walk in each other's shoes, and sometimes we need to stop, listen, and just hear the other person's side of the story. And it's amazing what we can accomplish when we do that. So I think this is a beginning. It's not something that's going to be solved overnight, but I think it begins with just listening, hearing the other person's side of the story, and coming to there's a happy medium somewhere where we can solve these issues.
I agree. I will hold my thoughts for the moment, but thank you so much for that. Charmaine?
Yes.
Yes, if you can come in.
Mr. Martin made some very good points, and I just want to add, to what and piggyback on what he has said. So, as a Montserratian who was living outside, I've learned some very valuable lessons, both outside Montserrat and inside and in Montserrat, both in the UK and in the United States. Now, in order to keep up with your community and show that you're still interested in being a part of the Montserrat community, you have to be able to keep up with the new developments in your country as well. So it's, you need to communicate, but it's much more than, there's much more to it than that. You need to keep your memories alive by socializing with Montserratians and attending Montserrat events that are outside of the country. You also need to stay connected through other social groups, wherever they are located, show your interest. If living abroad changes your concept of home, then you need to determine if Montserrat is still home to you, you see. Because if you disconnect yourself and then suddenly you come in and want to help run things, as Montserratians would say, then there will be strong resistance. You know, what happens when Montserrat, or when home is no longer home? Because I've heard people say Montserrat does not feel the same anymore. It's not like home anymore. And some people are not coming back. You know, so instead of feeling longing and that warmth or even nostalgia, all you feel is displacement and loss. There's some people like that, because some people need debriefing from the volcano and what happened there. We must understand that. But the way to change things around and adjust to feeling at home again is to socialize, communicate, network, follow the development in your country. All that is imperative.
Lovely, thank you so much. You said a lot there as well, so thank you very much. I am going to come to James now, please.
Yes, thank you, Chantel. And of course, Edwin would have mentioned some things, and in terms of people who had to migrate because of the volcanic crisis. And he is right that there, up to this day, there remains that feeling that, you know, people ran away and left us here to deal with the fallout from the volcano. You know, and you know, it goes back again to a lot of things, all the core values. And I think the language and culture, I think they are inseparable, because language itself encodes culture, and it provides the means through which culture is shared and passed from one generation to another. Now, in terms of the community aspect of it, I think part of the fabric of a successful historical culture is, you know, connecting with and giving back to the local community. You mentioned a point there where there are people who feel that those Montserratians who are in the diaspora should not be contributing to how the island is being run. And I think that is a dangerous precedent to set, because I always feel that we should let all ideas contend. And, you know, you might not be able to give the financial support, but there are ideas. You know, I mean, we continue to box ourselves in here in Montserrat. And I'm saying this because I experience it and I know what the situation is on the ground. It must be who are on island, you know, and then, you know, they would tend to listen to somebody else other than being a Montserratian. You know, they will listen to that person rather than, you know, get a Montserratian's opinion in the UK or in the US or Canada or wherever it is. Now, because, you know, there are so many things, major elements of our culture. And, you know, when we look at Charmaine, basically encompassed everything. She spoke of the symbols and the language and the norms, you know, and she didn't really touch on artifacts, but that is a part that, you know, is ingrained in Montserrat's history. You know, I was listening the other day to Dr. Barnes. You know, she's the curator of the Montserrat Museum. And these were some of the things that were on display. And, you know, it denotes a very, very strong ilk in our culture. And these are some of the things that we need to embrace. And the communication aspect for me is critical. We must always encourage formal and informal communication consistently. This is one of the ways in which we are going to bridge this gap and address this whole disconnect that we are talking about. You know, I don't want to say much more on that, but, you know, I always believe that all ideas must contend.
Like that. I'm going to quote that on something. All ideas must contend. I love that. Thank you so much, James. I'm going to come to Kiretta about this same question, or just to share your views on this as well, please. Thank you.
Yeah. So for me, I'm probably going to look at disconnect through a different lens. When I kind of reflect on disconnect, I think about the disconnect between maybe older and younger generations, and also disconnect not just between those on islands and those abroad, but those abroad in the UK, US, Canada, elsewhere. So thinking more about the kind of generational disconnect, I think a lot about the knowledge and the wisdom that kind of going to be dying out as the older generation kind of passes. So I think about my great grandmother who's still alive. And I know earlier at the start of this session, Charmaine mentioned about the various bushes on islands that kind of are able to treat particular health ailments. And I think about my great grandmother because she had all of that knowledge, and where is that knowledge going? Who's passing on that knowledge? I would love to know about that stuff, but now she's in her 90s. She kind of doesn't have, she can't recall the types of bush. I think a lot about those sorts of things and what's going to be lost as the generations die out. Who's storing these things? Where is it going? And then also I think about my other great grandmother who used to kind of go into the mountains and pick cotton. And it's fascinating to me that she had those experiences, that those kinds of things were just 70 years ago. So I think about all of those things. But then I guess I also reflect on that in terms of the experiences that they've had. Montserratians have been through so many crises, the hurricanes, the volcanoes. Resilience has been built up and needs to be passed on, because this is the kind of thing that we can then, I guess, use in our day-to-day now. We're facing COVID-19. You have that kind of experience you can draw upon to kind of navigate the waters that we're going through now, through the uncertainty, through the stress. So I think about who's passing on those sorts of knowledge. Where is it kind of going? Where is that going? And then I guess in terms of the disconnect around the diaspora, my dad, if he went to Toronto, he would know someone. If he went to Miami, he would know someone. If he went to Boston, he would know someone. If he went to Anguilla, Barbados, you name it, he perhaps would know someone. I don't have those sorts of connections because he has that connection through the shared experiences, often their childhood friends who we went to school with. I would love to have a medium to be able to build those sorts of connections with Montserratians around the world. Or maybe COVID-19 opens up some sort of opportunity with conversations like this happening, with groups like Montserrat Voices and groups like WU forming to have these sorts of conversations and build those connections. And maybe through that, I'll kind of be able to really build connections to Montserratians who are on other continents as well as on islands. So those are a few of the kind of thoughts and reflections I have in terms of disconnect.
Okay, thank you. That's lovely. And thanks for adding that different dimension as well, because that's such a good point. And that's something I talk about quite a lot. The fact that I know a lot of Montserrat people who I'm not related to simply because I went to school with them, you know, and a lot of the younger generation now, they don't have that, you know. Most times it's just they know somebody because it's a family member or because it might be people that are part of their church or something like that. But then there are others who they only know Montserratians who are their family, you know, and that sometimes is a shame, really. So I am going to see if any of the panelists want to come in on that question before we look to get some questions from the audience. And I'm conscious of the time. We may run over by about 10 minutes or so. But any of the other panelists want to come in on that question?
Certainly. One of the things, there is the disconnect. There's no question. Everybody has established that and, you know, confirmed that. And I think I've come to realize, no, I think I've come to realize that part of it started from some people and the way that they grieve. And a lot of us grieved when we left Montserrat. And the Montserratians that we left behind may not realize that, but it was a period of grief. We were grieving for Montserrat, we were grieving to be back home. And then some people sort of isolated themselves from Montserrat in order not for the grief to overcome them. Because I was as close as Antigua. And I remember going home the first time after I left Montserrat because of the volcano, when I went to St. Martin and I came home for Christmas. And stupidly in my head, I was going home. It was when I actually had my ticket bought, I realized, going home where am I going to stay? I'm not going home. Normally I would land at Blackburn and I would head to Parsons and I'm home. And it just suddenly hit me. And I thought, I'm going to Montserrat and I have to find some place to stay. And it was I felt like an out of body experience. I just couldn't get my head around it. I came to the day before I was leaving to go to Montserrat and I still had not been able to pin, and everybody just kept saying, girl, come, just come, just come. It was easy for them to say, girl, just come, but they had no idea what I was feeling. When I landed at Blackburn, I felt as if I'd landed in a different country because I was not going to Parsons. And it took me months to get over that. And then when I left from St. Martin, I was living in Antigua. I was closer to Montserrat, but I was still needing to ask somebody, where can I stay? And this kind of thing. And I lived in Antigua for a whole year before going over to Montserrat. And I did not go until my friend said, my house is finished. You don't have to worry where you're going to stay. And literally the next weekend, I was on the ferry going down to Montserrat. And the feeling was different, but that year, it took me, I literally grieved for Montserrat. And this is what Montserratians who are at home don't realize, that a lot of us went through this period of grief and trying to accept the fact that we have no home to go back to. And these conversations are helping to dispel certain myths about the people who were supposed to have ran away and the people that we had to leave. Because for us, it was people that we had to leave. It wasn't us running away. So we need to dispel those myths and start to build and heal.
So much, Mel. Thank you so much. And that's the thing, is that communication.
Chantal, can I?
Mhm.
Oh,
Sorry,
Chantal,
go ahead.
before we move ahead, can I also interject quickly?
Yeah.
I think this is a great discussion and some great points have been brought out. But I just add that I think some level of disconnect, at least in terms of the generational divide, it's inevitable. Like we almost have to accept it, in the sense that we can't possibly create those links like Coretta was speaking about, in the sense that her parents have connections across the world with people who we went to school with, because the future generations outside of our island simply won't have those experiences. And also the way Miro spoke about home and losing a home in Montserrat. Similarly, I've heard my parents speak in romantic terms about their homes in Montserrat, which they lost. And as much as I want to understand it and I try to empathize with it, I can't, because I didn't experience that myself. So from the get-go, there's already this divide that's entrenched, and there's not much we can do to change that. But I think it's worth trying to mitigate that disconnect, and we can do stuff to maybe bring us closer, but ultimately we can't get rid of that disconnect, if that makes sense, because we can't just recreate that experience out of nothing.
Yeah, I definitely do get where you're coming from, that you can't recreate it as exact, at the same height then. But I feel that in some ways there can be a connection, especially now with technology and stuff. With the right arrangements, I don't know how to word it properly, but with the right arrangements, the right setups, with the right organizations, associations, etc., and creating platforms to have that communication, to break down barriers, to break down assumptions, and allow people to build relationships, because that's sometimes half of the problem. If there's no platform in which to build a relationship, how do I do that? If it's on my own back to try and build relationship with somebody in America or somebody over here and over there, it might not happen. But if there are associations or certain organizations and community groups and different things set up, then it kind of aids and helps that. So I see where you're coming from, but I also feel that
Of course.
in part, not in whole, but in part, something can be done, for sure. There's a question in the chat.
Yeah,
So
of course.
Darrell,
I'm not. Ooh.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
Shane. Did you want to just finish your point, Shane, and then I'll ask that question? No? Okay. So the question's coming from Cameron. He's asked, how can you help to encourage and enhance the culture from abroad and make sure the money goes back to Montserrat? And that's open to the panel. So I'll repeat it one more time. How can you help to encourage and enhance the culture from abroad and make sure the money goes back to Montserrat?
Anybody want to pick that one up? So I will jump in. Oh, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Because I was just trying to understand. When he says the culture from abroad, is he speaking about Montserrat's, the people who are abroad from Montserrat and to encourage and enhance Montserrat's culture abroad and then try to contribute to at home? Yeah, that's...
Yeah, I think that's how I've understood the question as well. So for me, the way how I see that question, I would think that's where you have your associations, because one of the points Charmaine made was about that socializing and going to things that are put on and supporting in that way. And a lot of the time, the events that associations do put on is usually like, possibly for like fundraising for some cause back on island and so on. So that's one of the things. Like I would say, just encouraging people to support community events when you see them. And somebody's made a point in the chat about Facebook help to build the connect, and it also helps to build the community as well. So when we see things pushed and promoted out on Facebook and so on, share it wider. You know what I mean? Whether you know the person or not, just share it wider, because by you sharing it, there might be somebody in your network that might be interested. You know what I mean? So we have to get into that space of sharing, attending things, just go, just go and contribute, especially if it's for a good cause and if it's upfront that this event is for this particular cause. So that for me is one of the things I think. But it's at the end of the day, you can encourage, but it's down to the individual as well, because if people don't have a genuine interest in their culture or in their community, then there's only so far you can go, so there's that. Anybody else want to comment on that question? And if not, I have another question, our final question. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in and touch on that from this perspective, where we have what I want to refer to as community fragmentation. Now, we question the idea of cultural identity by showing the dynamism which characterizes our culture, and also the imaginative character of our communities. Now, this makes it very fascinating, to explore the modes by which these immigrants, they negotiate what I want to refer to as citizenship, both in the host country and the country of origin, while hosted outside of Montserrat in this context. Now, I think we have to start by looking at how this fragmented and everyday diasporic citizenship is mediated by what I want to refer to as an interplay of historical, geographical, and contextual factors. And comparing experiences of Montserratians in the UK, in the US, in Canada, even in the Caribbean, and how they illustrate the role of context in shaping emerging modes of the diaspora citizenship in each one of these individual countries. Identifying the cultural norms and practices of the people, both in Montserrat and the other countries that I mentioned. now we look at the true value of community, and it should be taught. We need to teach the true value of community and the people brought to the place to appreciate every member of society and never to fight against each other, because that is one of the things that we are seeing happening over and over again. You know, and it goes back to Red Ride was saying earlier. Now, through successes and failures, the community should remain. I'm thinking that we should remain united. Evidently, a community is the remedy against what I want to call social fragmentation in roots. We need to start looking at the various characteristics of Montserratians in the diaspora and see how that we can fuse them. Chantel, you spoke about it earlier, about fusing, you know, the various aspects of the communities and see how best we can unite our efforts.
Thank you.
Can I say something real? Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
You know, Chantel, I just thought of perhaps a topic for future discussion. You know, the other component to this whole thing is that we need to look at our people. You know,
exactly.
I had an idea for a column I was going to write on my website recently, and the headline was going to be, "Welcome to Montserrat, where we love our culture, love our country, and hate our people." You know, we need to have an analysis of how we arrived at this moment, where I think one of the reasons we're talking about disconnect, one of the reasons is because we have a lot of resentment toward each other. Let's be honest. And a lot of it wasn't created by this generation. It was something that we found. And it goes all the way back to slavery and colonialism. We have a mistrust amongst each other. And it's something that was not created overnight, and it's going to take a long time to get rid of. It's something that's complex, and it's something that we need to discuss, because until you have a true love of your own people, everything else is secondary. Until you have a true love of your own people. And I think we should look at probably having a future discussion about how we arrived at this place. Because think about it. If a Jewish person hears about another Jew anywhere else in the world going through something, they're going to be concerned about that person, and they're going to do whatever they can to help that person, even if they don't know them. Would we be willing to help a Montserratian anyway if we don't know who they are? Would we be able to do it just because they're a Montserratian? We need to love each other just because we share a common history and a common culture. We shouldn't be worried about who they are or what their family did to our family back then or whatever story happened years ago. We need to put that behind us. And we need to evolve as a people and love each other. Understand that we come from a good stock. We are good people. We share a common, wonderful, proud history. We're non-violent people. We come from a good stock. And we need to be proud of that. And we need to teach our children that. And until we start loving our own, we're doomed for failure. Thank you.
I have to step in here, and because Edwin just awoke something inside of me that I was thinking about the other day too. And it's Arrow sung a song, Stranger's Paradise. Why did he have the resources to even sing such a song? It was because of what was going on, what he saw going on, what we saw going on, what we still see going on. And it's time for us to sing a new song. It's time for us. Montserrat is not Stranger's Paradise. It is our paradise. But it can only be our paradise if the people, the paradise is not just to do with the mountains, the sea, the sand, the food, the fruits. It has to include the people. And until we have that love that Edwin is talking about, it will always be the stranger's paradise. And we're going to be inside that stranger's paradise fighting with one another. For what? We don't need to be doing that. We need to be building and healing and loving one another. And that is how we're supposed to be going forward. 2020
Right.
taught us
I
that.
want to take this a little. I want to take this a little further because we talk about paradise, but paradise is doing. Paradise is disappearing. It's not all about the mountains or the beaches and the sea and stuff like that. Our community has always been made of different individuals who fulfill different roles with varying levels of success. History shows that in the past, individuals would learn from the older generation and try to perfect certain skills. Now we are short of nurses, we are short of all skills, short. Why is that happening? Because in the past, individuals would learn from the older generation, and that is not happening now. So there's no improvement in the quality of craft, and there's no learning of new skills. And what is happening? Our teachers in their various areas were able to assist students to develop different interests, their capacities with performing various roles, that sort of thing, but that's not happening anymore. And what is happening now is that we're sourcing more individuals from outside. And of course, that has an impact on the culture itself because we're not passing on anything. What is going to happen to our community in the future? What is going to happen to Paradise? And we need to take a careful look at that. And people in the diaspora as well, who are skilled and who are a resource to the island, they need to look at these issues and try to address them. Come, give some time, and go back because your country needs you. And if you can train individuals here, that is so important to the development of your culture and the development of your community. Otherwise, Montserrat is a dying culture and a dying community.
Okay, thank you. So a lot of points raised there in terms of the disconnect, in terms of the importance of culture and identity and everything. And the point I just kind of want to, I'm conscious we've really run over, but I didn't want to cut the conversation because obviously it was a needed conversation. But it's that trust piece, and if we just think about it on a personal level, at a very personal individual point where you think, okay, I see this person over there, I don't know them, I might have heard something about them, and I perceive them to be X, Y, Z based on what I've heard. I haven't experienced anything, but based on what I've heard, therefore I know I don't trust them from the off. How is that going to change? It's going to be via communication. Do you know what I mean? You have to start to even begin to understand, well, who is this person? Who is this person? And a lot of, I think somebody mentioned about a lot of, I think it was Edwin, the lack of trust and the lack of this and that and the other. A lot of it is inherited. We don't even know half of what is what. We just take up what we're on about. You know what I mean? And I feel like we need to get into spaces where we can share, communicate, get to understand each other better and realize that, my intention is not to come and take your job. My intention is not to make you look small. You understand what I'm saying? And when we start to have these communications, we'll begin to see and understand each other's intention, that all of us are doing what we're doing for love of country. First and foremost, that's what it's all about, So I feel that that's where, for us as a group, we can create these spaces. We have some focus groups lined up from some of the actions that came out from previous conversations. So we are trying to build these networks where people can come in and have conversations and see what is it that we can really do. Where can we go from here? How can we break down barriers? How can we dispel the myths that are running around? And the one that humbug up my soul, I have to speak it here. I'll make it run over, so I might as well talk it. This thing about us being small, I hate it. And the diaspora, I hate that term. We are Montserratians abroad. Let's start saying that. We're Montserratians abroad. And then maybe the fact that we're saying Montserratian when we're talking about the people outside may help us to understand, we're all the one same people. But when we use diaspora, it's such a foreign term. Diaspora could be anybody. And as somebody was saying, I can't remember who it was, in terms of, I think it was Edwin as well. if there's a Jew here and a Jew over there, they didn't say the diaspora, you know. What them say? The Jew over there.
Mhm.
We need to be starting to say Montserratian. Let's reinforce it, man. Let's reinforce it. Let's cut the diaspora conversation, because diaspora could be anything and anybody. You know, I don't consider myself to be diaspora. I'm a Montserratian who lives abroad. End of. Diaspora, I mean, I've not asked you who you talk. And that's just me, you know, but it's something that grates my nerve. And I think we need to change, because there's power in the tongue, you know, what we say, why it be. And if we keep singing diaspora, it will forever be diaspora. And we will never be Montserratians as a whole community, you know? So let's try and start to change that narrative as well. But yes, you know, I realize we've really gone over, and I did want to throw in another question, but I might just leave it, because the final question that I wanted to throw in was about culture as a whole. You know, we're here speaking as Montserratians, and it may not be everybody in the chat that's of Montserratian heritage, but culture as a whole is so important, you know. And I want to give the final question. I'll push it out, and I'll just take two from the panel in terms of culture. Why is culture important as a whole? And just two panelists, if you feel really strongly to share, please come in. If it's just one, that's absolutely fine, but that will be the last question for this evening. So why is culture important as a whole? Do I have any takers? If not, that's fine. I've got a beautiful quote at the end.
Okay.
I've got a beautiful quote at the end, you know.
I don't know what we were waiting for. Okay, let me just say this very quickly, not too long. I feel that culture plays an important role in molding us into the people who we are today. You know, and I also feel that it creates an environment of a shared belief, you know, a way of thinking and method of interacting among our people. You know, the words our language provides, it impacts the way we are able to think. That's my take.
All right, thank you, sir.
Chantal, I actually had an opinion, but I felt I had already spoken enough. I didn't want to. I didn't want. But let me just say briefly that one of my favorite sayings is that I left Montserrat, but Montserrat never left me. And I want to thank my family. Look, I don't know. I grew up with my grandparents in Montserrat, and I don't know if they set out to do this, but they gave me such a wonderful, culturally rich childhood that it stays with me to this day. And I don't know if it was their intention or if it was some sort of a divine thing or what, but it happened, and I am happy for it. I am proud to be a Montserratian, and that is why I try my best now, through my writings, through my archiving and everything, to talk about my childhood and to pass on the history for the next generation, because we're not going to be here forever, and we need to leave something for those coming after us, to let them know that we come from a proud culture, a proud heritage. Thank you.
Beautifully said, beautifully said. So with that, I'm just going to leave it there. Well said, thank you, Edwin. That wrapped it up beautifully. So I just want to really thank the panelists for giving your time today. It's such, you know, honestly, I really appreciate it. I came to you and you didn't say no. So I really want to thank you in front of everybody for making tonight what it was. Also, for those in the session, you know, thank you for being part of tonight's session as well. Thank you for bearing with us as we've run over a little bit, which is not normally our thing, but when it's good, it's good. So I wasn't going to rob nobody tonight. So at this point, I'm going to say my goodbyes, and I'm going to hand over to Derenique, who's just going to wrap up the session for us.
Thank you very much once again for joining us this evening. We've had a fantastic discussion, lots of comments happening in the chat section. And just as we were having that final question delivered, Coretta Farrell put something in the comments, and it says there is power in the language used. And I think that was very important, and I would love to end on that. There is power in the language used. So what's next for Montserrat Voices? Montserrat Voices will continue to host open discussions, panel discussions, and more focus group. And if you would like to be a part of this and find out more about what we're doing and what we've got coming up, please do join our mailing list, and I will put the link into the chat so that you're able to do that, and contact us at montserrat.voices@gmail.com. And with that said, I just want to leave you with this quote that came from and came out of Chantal Carty's dissertation that she wrote on identity, community, and culture. And it reads, "Identity shapes community, and in turn, community reinforces identity, and culture underpins them all." So I will leave you with that. And we would just like to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from Montserrat Voices. Thank you once again for joining us, and have a blessed evening and afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.